Hey guys, this video is going to go on our Wheels in Japan playlist and also our audio podcast on SoundCloud. So if you haven't got time to sit and watch this, you might want to just listen to it on SoundCloud. If I remember, there'll be a link underneath this video. So Uber taxi, they call it in Japan. Uber has been in Japan for a year or two, or a couple of years, and we haven't paid much attention to it. It doesn't really affect us, or we don't really have use for it, so we haven't really paid much attention. However, we've not been able to use or look at YouTube at all recently without being subjected to Uber taxi ads. So fortunately not on our videos, because of our generous patrons, we've been able to turn off the advertisements or the advertising on all our recent videos. Thank you to the people on Patreon for that. So we haven't had to listen to it on our videos, but we do watch other videos. We watch documentaries and things on YouTube a bit. And just every ad we seem to see is an Uber taxi ad. So they're pushing it really, really hard. Apparently it's a build-up to the Olympics. They want to get more drivers on board and just sort of generally promote it and get it more out there in Japan. So we weren't really interested in it, but we know that there'll be some people out there that might be interested, and there'll be people that'll be coming for the Olympics that might be interested too. So we thought we should address it. We know nothing about Uber. We've never used it. We've never had reason to use it. So we looked into it to find out what people are saying. There goes that front camera again. I think it's the battery. It's really cold. It's about 5 degrees or something in the car at the moment, so that might be the problem with that front camera. The battery might be too cold. So anyway, we looked into it to find out what people were saying, what was good about it, what was bad about it. It seems that it's been a bit of a hard sell in Japan because, as most of you guys already know, the public transport system in Japan is really, really good. So if you're in one of the major cities, one of the capital cities, you don't really need a taxi usually, because you can pretty much take trains pretty well anywhere really efficiently and pretty well whenever you want to, because the trains run so frequently that if you walk onto the station platform, usually you don't have to wait more than a few minutes and the next train will come along. So the train system's so efficient, and there's stations everywhere, so that takes care of most people, including us. You know, we really have to take a taxi anywhere. We drive most places, and then if we want to go somewhere using other transport, we usually use the train. So most people in Japan are probably the same. And then the other thing is that if you do like taxis, or you want to use taxis, the taxi system here, and we've showed you before, the taxi, what it's like to ride in a taxi in Japan, is amazing. You know, the taxis are immaculately clean. Someone using their smartphone in front of us. Sorry, you couldn't see that. There's a car in front of us, the guy's on his smartphone, the light went green, he's just sitting there. Yeah, taxis in Japan are amazing. As we've shown you, you know, they're immaculately clean. The drivers have got their white gloves and usually a suit, and they're everywhere. You know, if you want to catch a taxi in a major city in Japan, it's usually not difficult. There's taxi ranks outside most of the major train stations and the airport and all those places you normally find taxi ranks. And then, you know, hailing a taxi or calling a taxi is just too easy. So as far as, you know, how easy it is to get hold of a taxi, it's really easy in most of the capital cities, pretty well any time of day or night. So that's not normally an issue. You know, outside the hotels, they normally have little taxi ranks outside the big hotels, and you know, it's just because the numbers of people in the cities in Japan, sort of because of that, the services are all good. That's why there's so many trains, and that's why there's so many taxis and all that sort of thing. And the standard of the taxis is so high. So as far as reliability or convenience, you know, probably the taxi will probably win anyway. The downside for Uber is that they're not big here yet. And they probably won't be. It's a bit hard to imagine Japanese people getting into it. It's not, you know, they're pretty happy with their taxi system the way it is, and there's no real reason for them to be into it. Apparently the Uber thing, you don't need cash, and it's all cashless, so that might be an advantage to some people, but you know, there's also taxi cards and things here that people use, so it's hard to see why Japanese people would bother using an Uber, and same with visitors to Japan, why tourists in Japan would bother to use an Uber, you know. So it's just hard to see it taking off, and of course that's a cycle too, isn't it? Because it's not popular, there aren't a lot of cars doing it, and because there's not a lot of cars doing it, that's going to keep it unpopular, isn't it? So it's sort of, that's obviously why they're hounding us with these ads, is to try and get it going. But it's just hard to see it going. The other thing is then the cost. We compared the costs of the Uber Black, they call it. So they call it Uber Taxi, and they've got Uber Black, and then Uber something else is the sort of the bigger version. And the costs for, compared to the taxi cost in most cities, is it's cheaper to take a taxi than it is to take an Uber, so they're not going to win that one. Although there are some penalty rates at night and at other times for taxis that can make it a bit more expensive than the Uber at some times of day. But generally, in most places where you are in Japan during the day or during, you know, normal hours, you'd find that the taxi's cheaper as well. So yeah, it's a bit hard to see. It's a bit hard to see why we would use it, and it's a bit hard to see how it's going to work. From a driver's point of view, there might be some people listening to this thinking, oh geez, that'd be a good job in Japan, and it probably could be too. Customers would be pretty polite and pretty clean and tidy, and you wouldn't have any sort of security risk or anything like that doing that job in Japan, so it probably would be a pretty good job if you had enough customers. But apparently the laws here are different. You need a taxi driver's license or something like that, special license to drive, and special certification for the car as well, and this is the law, not Uber. This isn't Uber rules, this is Japanese law. They're a lot more strict. They really resist things like that when, you know, when what's the homestay one? Airbnb. When Airbnb started operating in Japan, they actually changed laws to regulate it more because they didn't like it. They didn't like this unregulated, you know, anybody can have people come stay in their house and charge money for it. They didn't like that model, so they actually brought in new laws to jump on it. We made a video about it at the time. They made new laws to shut people down, or not to shut down, to regulate it, to make more control over you know how that Airbnb thing worked in Japan, and all sorts of rules and regulations about how they did it. They have to be registered with the local city council and all sorts of things. So they made it really difficult. After they did that, a lot of people pulled out of the Airbnb and said, all right, no, we're not going to do it. It's too much hassle, too much rules and regulations, and that's sort of the way the Japanese government handles things like this. So that's what they've done with Uber as well. They've, no, you have to have a taxi driver's license, and you have to have this, your car has to be licensed for it, and you have to have this and this. And there's likely to be more of that if there's any problems at all. If there are any problems at all with the way with Uber and what it's doing here, they'll regulate it more as well. So it's just the way they deal with things like that. There's regulation and more regulation, and trying to make everybody conform. And so yeah, so the bottom line, if you wanted to do it the other thing is, of course, you wouldn't get a visa. You wouldn't get a visa to do that job. You'd have to have some sort of other visa. You couldn't get a working visa to be an Uber driver. That's not going to happen, sorry. And we made videos about that before too. You know, you can't get a visa for stuff like that. You'd have to have some sort of permanent residence visa or a spouse visa or something to do something like that. So, and your Japanese would have to be really good because, you know, a lot of your customers would be Japanese, assuming you get customers. So yeah, from a driver's point of view, can't see it working. It's just not going off. It's just not going off here. So just can't see it from a driver's point of view being a worthwhile thing. From a customer point of view, yeah, look, if you like the whole Uber thing on your smartphone and call them up, you know, that's why you want to do it. But there's no real reason to use it here. You would find, you know, if you used your Uber one day and you used a normal taxi another day, you'd probably just stick with the normal taxi. You know, it'd probably be better. So yeah, that's about that. Wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't last very long. They're obviously pouring a lot of money into it to try and make it work here, but yeah, wouldn't be surprised if it didn't work here. Just can't see Japanese people using it. You know, can't see Japanese people getting into it. Can't see a reason why they would. Just can't see any benefit to it. You know, when the taxi system is so excellent as it is, and so clean and so reliable, and the drivers are usually pretty polite, and it's all good. There's no real need for it. You know, there's no need for it. Obviously, Uber wants to crack into it because it's such a huge market. You know, 127 million people. But just don't think it's going to work. Would not be surprised that sometime in the next, maybe after the Olympics, they're probably pouring all this money into it before the Olympics to try and get it going so that it can capitalise on the Olympics when all the visitors are here. But would not be surprised if a couple of months after the Olympics they decide no, it's not working and just close it down. Would not be surprised at all later on in 2020 if they just went, no, it's not working, and just shut it down. So anyway, that was that. We really weren't interested in the whole Uber thing. We tried to get talking about it in the family and everything. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's not really interesting to us. But we knew there'd be people out there wondering about it, so there it is. Anyway, there it was. Got to look into this camera battery thing. It's just probably too cold. It's about 4 degrees outside at the moment. It's about 6 in the car, so that's probably the problem. Look into that. Anyway, there it was. More videos and audio podcasts coming soon.